It didn't work. Trying again.
Aha.
Haha. Hey, everybody. We had a little bit of technical difficulty for a second, but we're here. Thanks for being here. Happy Tuesday, Mike. How are you?
Happy Tuesday, Bob. I am swell. How you doing?
I'm good, and I want to welcome everybody to Pop Culture SquadCast Live. We are here for you. We have a great guest tonight. She's not quite in the green room, but we're looking forward to having Leah Williams on just a little bit. Sorry, we have one technical thing that's in my way here. Okay, good. All right.
Hey Sherry, we need to have like a test pattern, like the old test patterns.
Yeah, I'm working on that. We're getting there. We've been pretty on top of things, and I appreciate everybody being here and watching with us. We have a ton of really cool guests lined up over the next couple of months. So we expect to be as regular on every Tuesday night as you can expect. And some Thursdays, because we have a lot of people to see. We want to get them for you. Let's talk a little bit tonight about, and I kind of want to get this out of the way. So we are not going to have a live show next week. There will be a Pop Culture Squadcast in our regular hour. We're gonna record something with an interview that we're gonna do with John Dunning, and he will be here. You're gonna see more about that on our socials, but we're not gonna be live next Tuesday. We are going to be hopefully celebrating, definitely praying, or something. Because
we will not be celebrating next week, because it won't be over. Next week at this time. It's just there's just no way in hell. I mean, if this were a reasonable world, we wouldn't be so anxious, would we?
That's true. That is 100% true. Hey, Bill, glad you're here. Yeah, so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the substance of your column this week on Pop Culture Squad on Brainiac on Banjo. You were, entreating folks to vote. If in America next Tuesday night is the edge of the apocalypse, and it is election day. It is something we have on this show have kind of talked around for the better part of a year or so. Why don't you kind of what's your stance on that? Why is voting such a thing for you?
Well, first of all, I've been writing something like the column I wrote for this week ever since at least 1970. Now, if you do the math, that means I'm older than shit.
Well, I wasn't born then, so there's that.
Yeah, well, see. But my politics really haven't changed that much. In order to have a democracy, you have to vote. It's just that simple. When the former president said, just vote this year, you won't ever have to vote again, I take that seriously. I take that very seriously. Because given all of their behavior over the last, 9 years, but certainly the last 4 years in particular, I do believe that our entire democracy, and I mean that with a small d, democracy, just the way you either learned it in school or should have been taught it in school. I recognize they don't do that much anymore. You got to go vote. And in order to vote, you really should have a good idea of who the candidates really are. And that's true up and down the ticket. The local candidates, the national candidates, and you should try to do it thoughtfully. And quite frankly, it's okay to do it from the perspective of what's in your best interest. If putting a person in office is going to take away all of our rights, including the right to vote, and is going to treat people the way they were treating people at Madison Square Garden this weekend, or have been for the last 9 years, you goddamn well better vote, because we need you to help put an end to this. If you disagree with me, well, you're wrong. But aside from that, if you disagree with me, make it known. That's how democracies work. You go out there and you vote. And I do not believe, being the old school radical, that voting brings about politicians who are interested in change. We vote defensively. We always have. We don't want one motherfucker in because he's going to really screw shit up. So we'll choose another motherfucker. If you can't find any candidate who appeals to you, then perhaps your standards are too high. Because these people are, first of all, people. Second of all, they're not geniuses. Third of all, they each have their own axe to grind. And it's pretty easy to figure out what that's all about if you just read or listen to media that is not already in the bag for someone. Everybody thinks all the media they don't like is in the bag for somebody they don't like. Some of that is true. Some of that is not. A lot of people who've gotten a really bad rap for being reporters are excellent, and they have the whole school of journalism thing behind them. They have fact checkers working at the newspapers and media outlets, and you have a relatively good chance of knowing that what's being said is true. If it doesn't seem true, check it out. If it seems really stupid, check it out. If it seems offensive to somebody other than you, like that could be offensive to somebody, like calling Puerto Rico a garbage mound. That's really where that person is coming from. And by today, if you're tired of being called a racist because you never say the N-word, please remember that you most certainly could be a racist. And if you are putting a stone-cold racist, sexist motherfucker back into office, that makes you a stone-cold racist. But right. You watch the show, so I have to assume you're not.
Well, I hope so too. I hope that we have a wonderful group of human-loving humans watching and listening. I appreciate you doing that, Mike. And I'm sure our listeners do. Sometimes we talk about politics here. We never really get that deep as we did now. But this is our last show before the election, and I just wanted to give us that opportunity.
Bob also knows that if he winds me up, I'll just waddle forever.
And that works for me, and it lets me keep my job. I want to change gears just a little bit. There was a passing today, and I want to kind of, mention that Terry Garr has passed away. And, I know she's been suffering for the last few years with difficulties due to MS. And she was a fantastic actress. Just a brilliant comedian and wonderful actress. And, a light has gone out. It's a little dimmer that she's not in it anymore. I can't even list the number. It was funny. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I'm like, and they're like, "Oh, she was in Tootsie," and I'm like, "Yeah, she was in Tootsie. She was in Young Frankenstein. She was in Mr. Mom." And they're like, "What? I don't see that." I'm like, "What? How do you not see Mr. Mom?"
It's because you're a very, very old person, Bob.
Well, listen, this person was older than you, so
Older than me
yes, by a month.
by a month. Okay, I'll go along with that one then. Terry Garr was always a pleasure to watch work.
Mhm.
Always. She was in the first unsuccessful spin-off pilot from Star Trek.
Yes.
She co-starred in the Gary 7 pilot, which was run off as the last episode, I think, of the second season of Star Trek. The network, and which was NBC at the time, did not pick it up. And even though I think Gary 7 has been brought back in various referential forms,
Mhm.
And I always liked the guy, and I thought he was a really cool character. I was disappointed that it wasn't picked up more because of Terry Garr, because I just love watching her work. And I still do, and I still will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, let's talk about some other things that are going on in the world of pop culture. We owe, and I don't know if Kyle Starks is going to be listening to this, but I may have to point him at it because he wanted to know when we got a chance to read Absolute Wonder Woman. What did we think? Did you read it?
I did.
Well, what did you think?
I thought it was a great story. The artwork was terrific. There was no reason to call it an alternate Wonder Woman. It would have been a very fascinating and wonderful book on its own were it to have been named something else. But they don't have enough Wonder Woman, like they have more than enough Flashes and Batmans and what's that guy? Green Lantern.
It's a lot of Superman.
They have a lot of Supermen. So now I guess that they're extending their Wonder Woman doppelganger.
Well, there's a lot of Wonder Girls.
There are a lot of Wonder Girls, and there's a cover coming out. It might be tomorrow or a week from tomorrow. I forget. I think
all the Wonder Girls.
Wonder Woman 15 that has 4 Wonder Womens on it, and is beautiful. It is goddamn stunningly beautiful. And this is a book that has had many a beautiful cover over the years. They're doing a great job with the regular character. Nothing wrong with the regular character. The whole absolute universe thing, okay. I don't think it's necessary. I think you can produce good comics without having to say, well, this is just like the comics that we don't think are quite as good. For what it is, it's great. And if it wasn't Wonder Woman, it'd be even better.
Okay. I think it was an excellent comic.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was wonderfully drawn. I think it was really good. I think the fact that they tied it to Wonder Woman, I get your point. So far, my opinion of the Ultimate Universe has been it's fine. I'm sorry. The Absolute Universe. I'm sorry. It's not absolute. It's not ultimate. I misspoke there. It's the Absolute Universe. It's been fine. It's fine. It's edgy. Sometimes edgy for edgy's sake. Not necessarily for the sake of the story. I thought that we're not going to do really much spoilers on this, but like I thought there was an interesting twist in the origin of the character. And like, so if it's an Elseworlds to me, right? To me, it's just
Right.
Elseworlds,
Sure.
which I loved. I'm a big fan of Elseworlds.
I am too.
Um, but it is, I think the edgy twist, the nail, for lack of a better word, because I think the nail is one of the best Elseworlds, um, is uh, is cute. It's interesting, and so there, Kyle, if you're watching or if you cut this, you know, I liked it more than I liked Absolute Batman, and Absolute Batman was fine.
Yeah, me too. I agree with that entirely. They seem to have a thing for big props. When I was reading Wonder Woman, I saw
Big
that, you know,
swords.
they had a big prop like Absolute Batman does. I was beginning to think somebody was trying to tell me something. You know, we got a big stick and we're going to beat you to death with it. Okay, but still,
Sure.
it's kind of funny, and I liked that part.
Well, we are going to get to our guest very shortly. She's in the green room, so we're excited about that. I just want to touch on one more thing before we get there. You and I have both been talking about Agatha all along.
Mm-hmm.
We've been both watching it. The last episode, I think it launches tomorrow or today, sometime soon. I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I feel, to be honest with you, I was a huge fan of WandaVision. I think WandaVision is one of the best of the Marvel Disney Plus TV series because it was outside of the box thinking. It was not your typical, sequential type of story. I think it made it very interesting, and I think that I got that from Agatha as well. I think it's a great follow-up without being a sequel, right?
I agree.
Although maybe it is, maybe it was a sequel
Well,
all
it is
along.
a sequel, and they're doing a Vision series next year, so there's usually a broader environment for these shows.
Sure.
And I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think that what some people, I mean, I know there are a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, there are some people with problems with the show. Some just because there's nobody with a penis in it except for one kid who turns out to be the most important person on the stage because he's got a penis. But it's not a superhero story. It's sort of a horror story. If this were done with the Archie horror within the Archie horror line, it would have worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
It might have scared the Archie folks a little bit, particularly the nude scene, but it would have fit perfectly. It's a good story. If you're expecting Thanos to show up and change everything, well, I suspect you're going to be disappointed, but you never really know.
Yeah. Bill, you got it right. You got it right there.
Right.
All right.
I mean, everybody is the target audience. People who watch TV is the target audience for every TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, thanks for dealing with us and letting us go through our nicks and knacks and bits and bobs of our opening segment. We appreciate it, and gives us a chance to warm up. I am super excited for our guest tonight. I have been wanting to talk to this person since we started the show. Like she was immediately on the list of people that I wanted to have on the show. I think they're brilliant writer, and I shout out to a certain editor that I love for getting this connection so we can get them on the show. But I don't want to wait any longer. So everybody, welcome Leah Williams. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Mike Gold, Leah Williams. It's very nice to
Yeah.
meet you. Thank you so much for being on the show. As I said just a minute ago, I am a huge fan. I think every time there's a new book that comes out, I'm like, oh, that book looks really cool. You're writing it. And all of those things were so good. I there's a lot of things I want to talk about tonight.
Sure.
But let's start with Power Girl because that's kind of the thing that's of the moment. And
Sure.
you first of all, I know that Adriana is leaving soon. Adriana Mello is the artist right now, and I am a huge fan. She's a friend, but I'm also a huge fan of what she's doing with you. She knows how to draw a line, and just really there's it's just so perfect the way that especially the last few issues where you guys have been working together. What is it like? How do you move from creative partner, right, artist and to artist? What do you gain something from each person? Do you add things differently? Do you approach different artists differently? How long does it take for you to get comfortable there?
Oh, sure. I definitely switch up when I'm working with a different artist. I like to ask artists what they enjoy drawing most right off the bat. And if there's any particular characters that they've always wanted to draw, if it's within my purview to bring them into the book, I will do my best. And I've super enjoyed working with Adriana. I think that I noticed right away how great she is with like the facial expressions and the character acting. So I would include kind of more of these like, kind of lighthearted, more comedic scenes just because I love seeing Adriana draw them so much. I think it's so fun. I think that, she's given kind of a comedic flair to Power Girl and Omen and Natasha that is just so fun, so much fun.
I think that's what helps distinguish Power Girl from the other Superman family, if you will, members. Is that there is a sense of humor there, and I think it was lacking in the character when it was formed back in the 70s, and it sort of grew out fairly naturally. So
I think so too. Yeah, especially in like Jimmy and Amanda's run, when you look at their Power Girl, she's so funny, she's so sassy, and that's definitely. I think that irreverence is a spirit that I wanted to keep alive and maintain. That sort of irreverent.
I think need more irreverence in this world because there are so many uptight people. They need to unwind.
I think Gail kind of also started really fostered that in Birds of Prey with Power Girl. I want to talk about, if we can, get into some of the, like, you've made a lot of, I love the book, and you've done a lot of things to alter's not the right, to modify certain things about the character. One, and I want to talk about, if you don't mind, the name change, right? So for people who aren't reading the book, one of the things that came out of your run was originally in Action Comics. Power Girl has a new alter ego identity as Paige.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that was brought to you? Is that something you brought to the character? How did that process happen?
It actually has more to do with, I don't know, the way that I see Power Girl in particular. She's had multiple aliases before.
Sure.
And so to me, it's kind of like she takes on new alter egos depending on what the mission is, depending on what she's working on. So that doesn't mean that she's going to be Paige Stetler as she is in our book. forever. It doesn't mean that Karen Starr doesn't have another story in the book. It just means that, Paige Stetler is something that she set up initially for her work at the Daily Planet. So it's also just a way of like kind of providing a long runway for our story where we built it up foundationally from the very start, because we did want new readers to feel like they could access it without, doing anything to disrespect her existing continuity or existing fan base. It was always supposed to be like a fresh start, a new beginning, so that new readers can get on board. And then we, kind of keep building and building and building. And I think Paige Stetler was a name that came kind of organically out of like the nicknames that other characters had for her. They were
Right.
calling her PG, and then Peej, like Peej is a nickname that a lot of people use for her in the book. And so eventually John Kent was like, hey, that kind of sounds like Paige. And like, since it's a fresh start, you're on page 1, that kind of thing. Like, it's a new story. That's why we ended up going with Paige Stetler
But
in the beginning.
Okay. But John Kent didn't come up with that. Leah did. Is it Leah or Leah? I'm sorry.
It's Leah.
Leah. Okay. Leah came up with it, right? I mean, you are the writer here, and you are...
Sure, but I'm the one who put the words in John Kent's mouth, so he did say it. I mean, like, it's my same thought process too, but canonically we're talking about John.
Sure.
And it made Paige feel special. It made her feel like, oh, this is family. Like, you're, a part of my life, and you are looking out for me, and you gave me this really special like nickname that I actually think is really cute.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely love it. I do. I'm a big fan of Power Girl. I've always been a big fan of Power Girl. I always felt that and Mike, was at DC when she became extremely problematic immediately. Which was the fact right immediately after Crisis on Infinite Earths, when she was still there, but she couldn't have existed. Right. But I really enjoy the run, what you're doing with the character. She feels, even though she's running into problems and whatever it is, she feels authentic. She feels like she's herself. She feels happy with herself. And I love that. I love that she's doing that. What's the mandate? Like, we're at issue 17, 18?
17.
How many are we going to keep going for? Like 100? It'd be good for me. I'm happy with that.
I mean, I'd love that. I'd work on this book forever. So I am currently working on issue 18. I think I can say that it's been renewed through issue 20. I hope that's not sensitive information, but with the option to continue,
Sure.
if numbers are healthy and people want to keep reading it, I'd love to keep writing it. But it's just kind of the way things work in comics now, where it's like approved by ARC as you move forward. So, I mean, we've done respectfully in that department, and in 20 is really, really awesome. Would love to keep going. I have so many more things that I want to explore with her, such as the Karen Starr mention that I brought up earlier.
Yes, well, you've intrigued me, so
Well, I can't say anything about it because spoilers, but
Sure.
if the book continues, then that's the direction we're going to be heading in, because we were talking about like foundational stuff for Power Girl. She's in like a really healthy place now. She's got her first boyfriend, she's got a best friend, she's got close friends and family, and she's been doing well for herself. So I think that it's just kind of the natural path moving forward to maybe look backwards a bit and investigate, like, okay, well, let's talk about this Karen Starr thing.
Cool.
Before you and Jonathan got involved with the character, she didn't have, to my opinion, that much of a sort of secret identity life. It would change a lot. There wasn't much there. You kind of have to remember. But that's because you didn't.
You mean
have to-
like compared to someone like Clark Kent,
Oh
where
yeah.
where the identity is like really baked in. Yeah, she's
Oh yeah.
different in that
Clark
regard.
Kent is Superman.
Yeah.
Superman is not Clark Kent. You know, he had to grow up being Clark Kent first. And we didn't get that sense we don't get that sense with too many other characters. But you coming into a character that's been around for a couple of decades, and I was there when she was created. I remember. You hung more on her frame than I think most of the writers who preceded you combined.
So, Mike, you were there at the beginning. Did you tell Wally to fill in the window?
No, I didn't.
I mean, I have the issue. Have you seen the issue where the window was supposed to be covered in, but the outline is still there on the cover?
Yes,
like inside, there's an issue. Inside the window is gone, but on the cover, which had been drawn earlier, the window was there, and so it's just colored in white, but the lines are still there.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite DC elements since the Joker's Comedy of Errors, and it's on the same level because it's the cover.
Yeah.
Joker's Comedy of Errors, for those of you who may not know, was a story published in, I think, 1951, written by Bill Finger, drawn by Dick Sprang, and the whole purpose of the story is to see how many times they can get the word boner into a Batman story in 1951 before the Comics Code Authority came around. Evidently, the people who might have objected were unfamiliar with the reference. So
you're telling me that reference is only like 80 years old or 70 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. I want to kind of, we're gonna come back to some part of Power Girl, but I want to, kind of rewind a little bit. You started being published in comics in like 2017 ish. Why comics? What makes you a fan and wanting to express yourself creatively in this field?
So here's my comics origin story.
Okay,
I didn't get
I'm
into
excited.
comics until I was in college.
Okay.
And I started rooming with this girl who, quickly became one of my closest and best friends. Her name is Sandy Pletikosic. And she's a huge comics fan, particularly DC comics. So when we moved in together, she came with all of these trade paperbacks and hardcovers and short boxes full of comics. And I had never seen anything like it. Literally, my first exposure to comics was through Sandy. And what happened is we were just like chatting one day in my bedroom and about books and what we were reading. And she brought up, some comics that she was into at the time. And I said something really ignorant. I said, I thought comics were for dudes. And so Sandy gets up and walks out of my room. She goes over to her bookshelf and she pulls a copy of Watchmen off of it. And then she comes back in and thunks it down on my desk without a word. And that is the first comic that I ever read. And when I tell this story, I always preface it with now I would not onboard somebody with Watchmen, but for Sandy in this context, that was her single most effective argument for why everything I knew about comics was wrong.
Sure.
And so when I started reading it, I was live texting her my reaction, oh my God. And I was in film school. So I was, taking screenwriting classes and learning how to write for a visual medium. And, that's my passion. So fast forward 6 years later, by that point, I had worked in a comic book shop and completely fallen head over heels for comics. Sandy literally changed the trajectory of my life. And I was pursuing writing in my own way. I self-published a novel, and I had a couple articles published, just stuff that I was passionate about and had a lot of research on. And so it was actually one of these articles that got the attention of Chris Robinson, who was editing at Marvel at the time. And so he reached out to me, and he remembered a few years prior when I had been like Tumblr blogging from the comic book shop that I worked at. And so he was like, "Are you still into comics? Have you ever thought about writing comics?" And so, of course, being like a super fan, I knew exactly who he was when he emailed me. I knew what books he had worked on because they were sitting on my shelves. And I opened his email when I was living in like a 200-year-old cabin in Leadville, Colorado. And the only decoration I had was a 12-foot vinyl poster of the X-Men behind me. So like that's the context in which I received this email from Chris Robinson. I had to take 24 hours to calm down and calm down enough to reply. And when I did, I lied. And I was like, yes, I have thought about it. I had never thought about it before. I had never once considered the possibility. But it's one of those things, like, it was a door that I didn't know existed until somebody pointed it out to me. And that was Chris. So that's how I got into comics. And I'm just genuinely super passionate about comics as a fan. I love comics, and all of this enthusiasm and excitement, none of it is feigned or manufactured. This is actually what I love, and it's like rocket fuel.
It's really hard to fake.
It's hard to fake, yeah.
At a certain point, people who are more fanish than you maybe are going to call you on it. Say, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, of course, those same people will say you don't know what you're talking about anyway.
But, yeah, I get that a lot, no matter what.
yeah. That's okay, because they have those passions too. As a reader and as a not going to be a writer, they have those passions too. I always respect people who put their soul into the game, because they're storytellers, and that's where storytelling comes from. It comes from the heart, comes from the passions.
I can tell you it's real because of the way you write, because of you're trying to move things. You're trying to constantly tell new stories with characters and explore them. And that's not, people can do that and feel that you can tell that they don't really care about characters. They just want to tell a story. And I can tell that every time you're telling a story about a character, it's based on that character. It's a character. The story comes from the character.
Character is very important to me. I think that in comics in particular, when you're writing for Marvel and DC, there is an added responsibility you take on as a kind of torchbearer, because you are writing a character that is already beloved. So part of my process when I'm going into stuff is like reading the room and learning, like, I know why I love a character, but let me see, what else is beloved about this character, what really resonates, what's most important to them, because I like to have a complete picture before I really try and embody their voice. And I've done this with every character that I've ever written, even ones that, I was already coming into as a super fan. And you brought up being a fan and how it's different. I can sometimes notice the difference when I'm communicating with my editors, because I get like too excited and I talk too much in emails. I have too many ideas. And whenever I do that, like my editors on Power Girl, I love them so much. They are so patient with me. And like, Brittany, when I'll send her a really excited email, like, 1,000 words of ideas and how excited I am about stuff, I feel like if I had a less patient editor, I would not still be working in comics. It's like fangirlish behavior, like I definitely do at times have to consciously tamp it down and be like, be chill, be normal, be professional. There's a time and a place for that, and it is not in your editor's inbox.
Yeah, sure, be professional, but don't be dead. Your heart and soul should be in the story where appropriate. I mean, you should also be able to sort of write around stuff that you don't feel passionately about, of course. But Jeanette Kahn, who was publisher at DC for a long time, hired me the first time I went to DC in '76. Totally believed in that. Why would somebody get all excited about a project if you're only going to give it a 3-issue trial run? So that's how we canceled Showcase, for example, because we're relying upon the enthusiasm of the talent that's working on the book. I, as an editor, handle creator-owned projects totally differently than corporate-owned projects, because in a corporate-owned project, I am there representing more of the corporation's interests and certainly a lot more of the fans' interests who bring that character to the table along with that new talent.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's different, I imagine.
It's totally different experiences the way I see it, but that enthusiasm, that passion, that's the same.
I do want to take a minute and shout out to Brittany, because I think is one of the best editors in comics today. And
agreed. Yeah.
And comics is better off that she is in it. And I was talking to her, I was actually had a conversation with her about Power Girl at one point. We were talking about how her editor notes in Power Girl and subsequently your writing and how they feed into those editor notes are the perfect way to do editor notes in comics in 2024. They are, you reference something, you give enough in the context of the panel so that I don't need to go back, but you then gives me an editor note says, if you want the more details, go over here and find it. And I think that's just, I mean, it's just one of the things I love about Power Girl, just the way that you guys work together.
It's a very, I call it healthy and holistic behind the scenes. It's a very like healthy and natural process between me and Brittany and Jillian in particular give me notes directly on stuff. And it's all very like collaborative and conversational and natural, and it feels great. And, Jillian and Brittany are incredible. They have this sort of like, okay, so if I'm down in the trenches and I'm moving forward, I can kind of see everything that's in front of me and around me. But, Brittany and Jillian are up here in a plane and they've got this macro view of everything. They can see stuff that is behind me that I'm not looking at. They can see stuff on the horizon that I can't see yet. And they're able to give me this context, not just within, the story on its own, but for other stories, other stuff that's happening in Metropolis at the time. Like, hey, if this is useful for you, this is going on in action, maybe you can draw from this if it's helpful for what you're doing here. And like, it's always helpful. I think that it makes the stories feel kind of more authentic and lived in when I'm able to sort of match step continuity wise with the other Metropolis books. And, coming from like X-Men comics, Krakoa era, that's my thing. I love it. I love collaborative storytelling. And particularly in comics, I think that it's kind of part of the magic of comics.
Absolutely.
I want to turn, let's talk about Marvel. Let's talk about your work at Marvel for a second. And we're coming back to Power Girl. So, so the X Factor thing, and when you're talking about characters doing what they do, the whole impetus for the X Factor run was North Star's concern for Jean-Marie. And I love that. They are characters that are near and dear to my heart. The fact of them being siblings has been something that I think was missing in their storytelling, because there was so much focus on Jean-Paul and his who he is and his personality for a really long time, and the relationship between the two of them was always one of the biggest things about their characters. And so the fact that you brought that was I really enjoyed it, and I loved what you did with those characters. You took characters that I didn't necessarily like, finally made me like them, Akihiro being the one. And then they killed him, which is annoying, but we won't talk about that.
I just started liking you.
I was so mad. I'm like, I finally get it. I can get my head around liking this character. And
that's the perfect time to knock him off.
Yeah, well, now we won't talk.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I like Ben. Nothing against Ben.
Like him.
Yeah,
nothing against Ben.
But I'll tell you something. Bob knows the story, but when I went out to a convention right after the Superman versus Muhammad Ali book came out, and so we're talking centuries ago. When I came back, Neil Adams, who's the artist and kind of co-writer, asked me what sort of reception, and I said, "Oh, people love it, but not necessarily all of it, because you really put it to the edge there." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you know that scene where Superman's lying out all battered, black and blue, Muhammad Ali beat the poo out of him?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, people really got very upset about that." And he said, and a big smile, and with Neil, his smile, you'd think his head was going to fall off. His smile was just huge. He says, "That's exactly what I want."
So I know you've talked about this publicly as well, but X Factor had a much longer plan for X Factor, and it ended with issue 10, and then you went on to do Trial of Magneto, mostly because you wanted to do Trial of Magneto and that storyline, right? That's what I've heard.
Yeah, that had been my pitch for what the next arc of X Factor would have been. And, it just ended up being a hit. So they were like, make that its own thing, make it Trial of Magneto. So that's what we did. And it became kind of a much bigger story than X Factor alone. So you can still see, the elements of X Factor in there, but they kind of take a backseat to Scarlet Witch and Magneto and kind of the magic of Krakoa and that kind of thing. But yeah, that was originally, something I had planned for X Factor. And it's really normal in comics for stuff like that to happen. I was talking earlier about stuff being approved by arcs. This is part of the reason why, so that if they need to segment something out and kind of give it a special spotlight, that they are able to do that.
Right. Sure. One of the things that I want to talk about is there's an aspect of your writing that has been noticed by everyone, including the GLAAD Award people. There's a certain amount of freedom of sexuality in the books that you write. So, and I mean that in as complimentary a way as you could possibly take it. Okay. There is, I love the humanness of the characters that you write. Whether I was recently reading Gotham City Sirens, and then I read Power Girl, and I feel that these are characters who have all the characteristics of a human being, whether it's whatever their their attractions are, doesn't matter, but they're very much complete humans with sexual concerns throughout their lives, but it is not what they're talking about. It's not the only thing in their world. We're not talking about that. It's just a part of them, right? And I love the way that you were able to do that. Is that something that you're conscious of? Is that something that you get pushback on?
I don't get pushback on it. Like, you
Thank
mean
goodness.
editorial? Back, no. But it is very much a conscious effort on my part because, I was talking about character work earlier. Part of that character work is I do want them to feel human. I want them to feel fully fleshed out and, have flaws sometimes because it's normal. And Power Girl, not human, but she's a person. She is
Sure.
very much a person, and she
She has
has,
human characteristics.
yes, she
And
does.
all of them.
And I think that, as somebody working in comics, it's in maybe one of the strongest ways that I can differentiate myself as a writer is to make these beloved characters feel real in a way that, you know, is something I do try to convey in all of my writing. And, I think that a part of that, like you mentioned, the sexuality aspect of it, these are, often characters who know themselves in that regard, Akihiro being one of them.
Sure.
But conversely, Power Girl is very much still figuring that out. Like she's got her
Yeah.
first boyfriend now, and it was kind of an awkward on-ramp because of the way that she was raised and socially conditioned, but they're figuring it out now.
Yeah.
Much like real life.
Right.
It's interesting for somebody who's had in a big two kind of publishing realm for Paige, Karen, Power Girl to not have had a established real long-term personal relationship. It's odd. Most people have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever other partner at some point. Omen has had plenty. But for somebody to have as long a career, a long existence as her, to have not, there's the Michael Holt stuff that's kind of Earth 2-ish.
Yeah.
But that felt forced always. It just felt a little like, oh, let's throw them at them. That was an interesting concept. But anyway, I love the characterization, especially in Gotham City Sirens. So across from me, on the opposite wall is a page from Harley and Ivy that Adriana Mello drew. So I have that right there. It was a present I bought for my wife. And I just love the way that they were so, you just really caught their voices and their characteristics immediately in that book. It was really, really, I will say it's criminally underrated and undersupported. I can tell you 100% because it doesn't matter what it is. It's criminally underrated and undersupported.
Thank you.
But wait a minute. You said that you have this page that you bought for Sherry for your wife. And
she put it up and it's right across from me.
I see. Okay, then you just answered the question. Why
our desks face each other
from you if you bought it for her?
Our desks face each other, so she's facing me, but she put it behind her, like I have it behind me, and so I'm looking at it.
Okay, then no, that's perfectly, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So I kind of want to talk about something. We're kind of talking about this. I want your opinion. I would love to know what you thought of approaching this book.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'd love to talk about this. This is one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on, and I never get to talk about it.
Let's talk about it. I will tell you, like when Mike Carey started the Barbarella book, I was telling people how amazing it was, and they're like, Barbarella?
So amazing.
Mike Carey's Barbarella
it's different. It's so
underrated.
Good. Yeah.
So good.
So good. I was a fan of that going into this.
Good.
And
and Amy Chu's Digisaurus?
Incredible. Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, like you had this great build up and then took them. And what was your approach?
Exactly. And that was the approach. Like, I got to play with these characters in the same sandbox, and it was so much fun. I did like kind of weird, timey-wimey nonsense with time travel. And also, there's kind of like an undercurrent of queerness between the two women
Sure. Well,
that
with Barbarella
was
has that.
right. And, Deja doesn't necessarily, but the way that it's played in the book is very much like, that's sweet, Barbarella. Like, that's very sweet of you. But I have to go back to my own time now. And I just had so much fun with that. I think that was maybe the first kind of longer story that I did outside of Marvel. And I hadn't started working with DC yet. So it was and I hadn't done any creator owned. So this was my first sort of opportunity to like free roam a little bit, like outside the parameters of what's expected. It's like, yeah, do your thing. These are the parameters. It's these two characters. Have fun. And I did.
So with that, I mean, is there a Howard restriction on that at all, or
what do you mean?
In terms of Deja, like, did you get any sort of editorial from licensing on that, or
no.
you just were able to go and do what you want to do? And I find that interesting. It's one of the things about, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but like one of the things about writing comics, especially when you're not writing your own characters, that somebody else owns it and they have a right to say it. I've had a conversation with a good friend of mine who's doing a pitch for something that I know the licensor and I know the temperament of that licensor. And I'm like, they're going to hate this pitch because I know them. I think it's a brilliant story, but they're not going to like it because they believe that it's their product.
Yeah, it depends on who you're working with. In this particular regard, Matt Edelson was my editor on it. Amazing. Had a fantastic time working with him. And what the licensors were looking for, because I think we did have a little bit of a back and forth on my initial pitch, because I was sort of like testing the waters. I wanted to see, okay, how far can I take this? Like, what about world building stuff? Am I allowed to interact with existing environments and assets from the books already? That kind of thing. There's always like a discovery process in the beginning when you're doing licensed stuff. But, what they mostly were looking for was making sure that like the character voice was consistent and, that it didn't work against the books in any way, which of course, since I was already familiar with, I wouldn't want to do that at all. I think like the one time I got a character note back, it was like, you've got Deja sounding kind of haughty in this first scene, like a little too royal, but she's a bit warmer than that. Can you, bank it just a bit? And I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. I love getting notes like that because it makes me feel more secure, like
somebody's actually paying attention. Someone's got you. They have you. They're listening. They're paying attention.
Exactly. Yeah.
Better still, they're not being arbitrary. They're not being capricious about it. Very often when you're dealing with a licensor, you're dealing with somebody who has no familiarity with comics or very little, or can't see the forest for the trees because their job is to protect this shrine. They see all those characters as shrines. Now, it's easier to do that today than it was 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago because the people that you're working with today are more likely to have been reading comics as more of an adult.
Yeah.
So they get it. But nonetheless, every once in a while you come up, well, I'm not going to tell the whole story because I've said it before, but when I was at DC, we did this Bugs Bunny Looney Tunes miniseries. Joey Cavalieri wrote. It was brilliant. It was one of the funniest things I ever read in my life. And the folks from Warner Brothers, from the cartoon studios, the lady who approves it all, flew from California to New York to bitch me out.
Oh my gosh.
Because that is not what Looney Tunes are all about. She kept on saying, pointing to things like Daffy Duck's speech impediment. We're making fun of people with speech impediments. No, we're doing Daffy Duck. And finally, just minutes before I canceled the series, I said, I asked her if she'd actually ever seen any Looney Tunes. And that's when we pretty much decided we're not going to do this. It was a shame. I mean, it was hilarious. I love Joey. Joey's a great guy, and he's a really good writer, and he's desperately funny. What they wound up doing was good, but not, it wasn't brilliant. This was brilliant.
Oh, that's a shame.
Well, and also let us remember that Warner Brothers own, both of us own Looney Tunes, they own DC. And the person who was in charge of telling me what not to do on Looney Tunes was the person who approves the artwork for the toothbrushes. The little cardboard.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what she did. And I'm thinking, there's more to storytelling than that.
Yeah. I've gotten notes from marketing teams before, and it's just like the way it looks initially to me is because I don't understand. I think it's a story note that I'm getting, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense to me. It throws a wrench into what we're doing. But thank God I have editors who are like, oh no, what they mean is
Right.
they want a better cover image, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get that. I can work with that.
Those aren't editors, those are interpreters, and they're really important.
They are very important.
All right. I want to talk about something, and please, this is not an ambush, but I really would love to have a great conversation with you about this character.
Okay.
Whoa.
I grew up on New Teen Titans. So I was exposed to Lilith when she came back into the New Teen Titans, and then I went back and I have like pretty much all of her Titan stuff. She's a character I love. I was interested in the concept of when Dan brought her into the Teen Titans. It was interesting. You are writing this character better than she's been written since Marv touched her last, by far. And possibly best as ever. I want to know, what is your experience and why did you ask for her? Was she thrown at you?
So you don't know the story. I'm excited to
No,
tell
I
you
don't.
this.
Please tell me.
It was a couple summers ago, and I was kind of doing like onboarding stuff, story stuff with Power Girl, and I was on the phone with Paul Kaminsky and Brittany, and we were just like kind of spitballing and talking out loud, and I think Paul was like, I wonder if Power Girl should have like a sidekick. And then
Sure.
I was like, immediately, yeah, I think she should. She should have a confidant. And then Brittany was like, what's Omen up to these days?
God,
and you could hear both me and Paul gasping on our like separate phone lines, just like, because it's so perfect, especially given their backgrounds with trauma and Omen's like counseling history and how well she'd be able to understand Power Girl. And, it's for that reason why with the Lazarus event, they ended up with a psychic connection because, Power Girl has always had some difficulty accessing her feelings and discussing them for obvious reasons because of how she was raised. So I can think of no more perfect foil than Omen for her best friend.
Sure. I mean,
and the rest of it just kind of came organically. I just wasn't willing to let her go. I love Lilith too much.
So I am under the impression, and I do not acknowledge the New 52 version of Omen, and so we'll just ignore that. I don't think she was treated well there, but I there's an interesting concept, and this is where I'm curious as to what your mandate was with her. I mean, I don't know how much you've done in terms of reading her history. Like, she is way more powerful in your hands than she ever has been, as far as I'm concerned. Was that something that you asked for? Was that something that was given to you? Was that something you just
That's just something I did. That's just something
Yep.
I wanted to do. And I think it's in part because I can just see the potential that was always there, even if, there wasn't necessarily a stage for it. I think that she's always been this powerful.
right?
And I just wanted to write her that way.
I'm gonna Mike can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if he knows, but so my opinion is that if Bob Haney could have done it the way he wanted to, she would have been as powerful as she is now, but probably would have gotten kickback from Marvel in the late
For being
60s.
too close to Jean Grey.
Too close to Jean
Yeah.
Grey. And so they kind of what?
Possibly. At that point in time, the relations were fairly strained, but Bob just didn't quite think like that. He would do what he wanted to, and then his editor, which was usually Murray Bischoff, although Jack C. Harris as well, and
well, especially towards the end, yeah,
he'd stop him.
So
he thought that was too complicated because
I mean,
Murray thought that the readers were still 12.
But they could have just changed her hair color to black and would have been fine. But the fact that she had red hair, like there's no other way around it.
It makes that costume work.
Well, I know it does, but
but the costume is because of the red hair.
And vice versa.
Feeding witch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you need a good confidant character, if indeed you need more than one, each acting in a different way. That's what separates friends and confidants from sidekicks.
Yes. Yeah, I think Omen is so much more than a sidekick.
That's right. And that's the important focus. That's what the story needs.
I did not read. I'm not sure when the latest issue came out, but I read it today because New York, and I was away for a week and whatnot. I'm sorry I missed you, but it would have been great.
Yeah, I missed you too. Brittany told me that we were apparently at the same party at one point.
Were we? That's
yeah,
funny.
but I don't know.
I'm sure we
which
were.
one it was.
But there's I'm dying for her. I am so I can't tell you how upset I am for her, but that is all the good parts of comics, right? I want her to be to get through this horror that she's dealing with, and it's wonderful. So
she's on the cover for issue 17, which was just released. So I don't feel like it's too spoilery to say that she survives.
Well,
she does survive, but it is really upsetting.
Not allowed to go.
This is so the Ejecta arc is what we're talking about, issues 13, 14, 15, and 16. And it's really upsetting. And it's been one of the most difficult arcs that I've written for Power Girl, because it is so brutal. It is brutal what Ejecta does.
Use that word in the story. She was brutalized.
Yes. And there's no other word for it.
Sure.
She absolutely was.
It's not a good act, but it's a good word.
Yeah. But the reason why it's so dark and difficult is because what we're setting up is issue 16, the final showdown between just Power Girl and just Ejecta. And at this point, like, there is no there is nothing that Ejecta could have done to Power Girl to piss her off this bad. But, you know, instead, she tried to take out Omen first so that the telepath wouldn't be able to, you know, read her mind and see her intentions and her history. And Power Girl was always going to be the end result. But like, I wanted an issue that shows us why we should be afraid of Power Girl, why we should be scared of her. You know, like if we were smart, we'd be worshiping the Kryptonians as gods. But instead, we let them, you know, pull cats out of trees and save our asses. So I wanted to set up this issue where, you know, we see Power Girl go all out, no holds barred, fighting.
I love when she does that.
I love when she does that. But, you know, you have to give it weight. You have to give it gravitas in order to make it land. And so for me, the through line of logic there is that Ejecta would try and take out Omen first, and that'd be her first mistake.
So I'm a huge fan of Lilith Clay. So there was a recent article in Back Issue magazine about Lilith. As you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Back Issue magazine, but it's you know, goes back to the Silver Age and does stuff. And so the guy who wrote it is a member of Pop Culture Squad. He writes up for us every week, but he had asked me for some quotes and he asked me some questions, trying to do some research on when did she get the name Clay. So since I have all of the Teen Titans, I went back and found it, and she's a really important character to me. She's an important character to me because of the way that she has been kind of brought along as scenery for little bits at times, and kind of like just like little bits of story, but then kind of ignored. And the fact that you've given her so much, I love. And it took me a minute, and I want to be honest with you, it took me a minute to say I'm okay with this, because she is so much more powered than she had been. But why not? You know, I love it. I'm so happy with what you're doing with her.
Thank you.
It's superhero 101, really. At some point, the character that you've been building up through all these emotional crises and physical crises, at some point, that character is going to say, my life has just crossed the line. I got to deal with this. And every one of us as human beings, assuming every one of us is a human being, has encountered that moment in their life probably every couple of weeks. Oh, particularly these days. So it's important because it draws the reader in, because those characterizations are what the reader is familiar with. It's earth as far as the reader is concerned. I'd like to ask you a question, though. You said that you were trying to get into like acting, movies, sort of a thing.
Screenwriting, not acting. Never acting.
Right. Okay, well, that's where my question was going. You, as a comics writer, seem to develop characters the way actors develop their performance based on character.
You're right. Yeah.
I don't see
You're
that
100% right.
And I brought a lot of playwrights into the comics business. So I admire you for that. And I wanted to know why. Where did that come from?
I am not actually sure where it comes from, if it is my film background, but my particular approach to writing characters is exactly what you've said. It's very similar to acting, almost even method acting, right. Where I go to, when I'm doing research for characters, I'm not just reading back issues. I'm also, doing research into the exact type of counseling services that Omen can offer, and, what that sort of crisis response looks like from somebody with her particular set of training. So I do this to embody the character voice as deeply and fully connected as I can, because I found that in my writing process, if I don't have to reach far for the character's voice, it makes it a lot smoother when I'm thinking about how they would react in certain situations. It makes the scripting go a lot faster. And it also just makes like idea generation for future stories more rich with potential, because I have this other kind of knowledge bank about, this character's like how they were raised and how they would react differently based on certain things, environmental factors, that kind of thing. So I'm real serious when I talk about character work. I
Sure.
I get real into it.
You put a lot of thought into it. Not to say that other writers don't, but not all writers do, and you sure as hell do.
It's almost kind of backwards, I've learned, where story comes first, I think, for many writers, and then characters. But for me, I for whatever reason, I go about it the opposite way, where I get a firm grip on character first and foremost, and then I do my idea generation. I don't know. For me, it makes me feel more confident when I'm, breaking story, that like I have a really firm grip on this character and how they would react in any given situation.
That's great. It does require all that thought. And people who don't write never had to test that out.
It's a different skill set. Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And it's one that you're always working on. You're always expanding that skill set, because there are so many different ideas that people have and things that people do, and you can experience stuff that you've never seen before just by watching a TV commercial. So,
Yeah.
Everything counts.
It's also kind of a unique situation in comics in particular, because, these characters already have a set kind of, traits, set of traits that they've had in pre-existing work. So I sometimes think of it as like a patchwork quilt. Like, I think a character like Emma Frost is a really good example of a patchwork quilt character, because she's been written differently so many times that it has made her kind of more nuanced and complex than she would have been if she had been written the same way every single time. So coming into a character like that, I think of it as a patchwork quilt where I'm looking at all of these disparate qualities, the vulnerability, the callousness, the different traits that she's displayed. And I'm thinking about, how do we make this cohesive? How do we make this, one singular complex character? And for Power Girl, that moment for me of wanting to unify kind of disparate aspects of her personality, I was looking at the way she was raised, and I was like, this is going to affect her so much. Being raised by an AI in the symbiote ship, that's really gonna leave a mark and affect her relationships with other people, until, she kind of learns how to be a friend and be a girlfriend and find community with other people.
Emma Frost is a wonderful, wonderful character, and the proof of that is that whereas so many different writers have used her in so many different ways in so many different stories, her gravitas is the same.
It is, yeah.
She brings that with her wherever she goes, and you can hook onto that and see where the story will take you. So
yeah.
Your affinity, which seems to me, from my observation, to be a pretty damn strong one with that character, does not surprise me at all, because you got to think about where you're going with it. You always have to be thinking about it.
I think North Star is another character like that too. A patchwork quilt of different qualities that he's taken on over the years, really complex, really nuanced. And another aspect that's really important to me as a writer, and you're going to be able to recognize this as soon as I say it, additive storytelling. I don't like destructive storytelling. I like additive storytelling, especially in comics, where there's an existing continuity, because I really enjoy kind of picking up storylines or characters from older issues and moving forward with it. And I want to be able to provide the same thing for future writers. So that's why my writing, there's always a get. There's always kind of another outcome that is additive in what I'm doing, because I want to, provide some kind of platform for anybody who wants to write these characters in the future. So I'm not going to bomb their house. I'm going to give them a new house.
One of the worst things that happens in the comics medium was due to my generation. So on behalf of us fading boomers, I apologize to the world for this. We were all comics fans before we got into comics. We were all maliciously solid and rabid comics fans, so that once we got into the business, what we had to fight, and some were no good at this, some were great at this, is the desire to fix things the way you think they should be. It's not that. It's not the way you think. Get over yourself. It's the way the character thinks. It's the way people will relate to the character. And if you're not thinking in those terms, you're just thinking for yourself. And damn it, my generation is good at that. So there.
Listen, I still don't like the middle spread of absolute all in.
Yes. Well, yes.
You don't have to comment on that, Leah. You don't have to comment on that.
No, I won't. No.
But yeah, we ran through that one.
So you brought up Jean-Paul, and you brought up the way that you kind of got into this business, and how much have you read? Like, I'm curious about that. Like, have you gone back and read the original Alpha Flights and stuff like that? You've done all that? Mm-hmm. And you loved it? You hated it?
I did. I loved it. I thought that it, what I love about X-Men comics is the found family of it. Yes. And I think you can absolutely see that in Alpha Flight.
Yes.
It's different, but it's there.
That's true. That's right.
And also bear in mind, when I'm going back and reading old Alpha Flight issues, I am already fully in love with North Star. Like, he can't do wrong in my eyes.
It's a different perspective for somebody like me who found him there. Like, I started reading Alpha Flight about 17, 18 issues in, and then I went back and got the rest of them. So his growth at that point, there was something that I loved about him, and I always loved about him. And then when he came out, I was not in comics. Like, that was in my, you're in college or it's a break. And so I came back into comics and found out that he had come out. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's wonderful. That makes all the sense to me. So his characterization changed dramatically when that happened, because he had not been used. He had not had anything of, there's a bit of one note to him early on, I think. I mean, there's the family, that his relationship with Jean-Marie is what defined him.
Yeah. But
that part of it was something that I came back to. And I have the Phil Jimenez cover of X Factor 10. Like, I made sure I have that one because it's beautiful.
It is.
We've had queer comic characters before him, but he, to my recollection, was the first to really come out in a major way. In a way that people,
he's credited as being as such. Yeah,
I'm not sure that that's entirely fair, but it's fair enough. It certainly is, and it's how at first it was how you differentiate characters, but it very rapidly became how you differentiate readers. Because at that moment in time, some readers couldn't handle it. I'm sure that's still true today. Obviously, we have an election coming up in a week that's going to show us how true that may or may not be. But some people have gotten over it. Some people never will. It's a ballsy step to do in comics only because people are going to say, well, comics, that's for children, which is stupid.
But we're inside the building. You know, we say that's stupid, but you know, I mean, I understand. You have to understand that there are people who have that ignorance. There are plenty of people who are ignorant.
I understand. I'm not very tolerant, but I do understand.
There's something about comic books. I mean, you know, thank you again. I cannot thank you enough, Leah, for being on the show. I love comic books more than anything other than my family. And
Nice.
Well, that's fair.
Absolutely.
But I am so thankful that you are in comics. I think you are bringing some fantastic stories and fantastic perspective on the way that characters are written. I enjoy, and I can't put enough emphasis on the word enjoy when I read your work, because it's authentic. It's stories that came from the characters that existed with their whole personalities. And I'm just so thankful for it. And I thank you again for being on the show.
You're an important role model.
Oh, gosh.
Because there are writer wannabes.
No pressure.
Wannabes who are watching this right now, probably tired of my babbling, but nonetheless still watching this. And what they're seeing is a person who writes brilliantly with her brain. You think everything out. You try to think everything out, at least, as opposed to, oh, this stuff writes itself. No, it doesn't. If it wrote itself, it would want royalties. You really think it through, and that is so critical for the newer kids on the block to realize, to understand.
I try. I really do. If Brittany is watching this, the reason why I haven't turned in my issue 16 revisions yet, I'm finishing them tonight, but it's because I am very, very carefully thinking about this fight that Power Girl and Ejecta are having, and like panel by panel, line by line, really, really like workshopping it over and over again for maximum impact, you know, because if we've been building up to it for 4 issues, I better make it count. But I feel like the luckiest girl in the world, to be honest with you. I get to work on stuff that I'm genuinely passionate about. I have a great time doing it. And yes, it is hard work, and I have very many late nights, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
There you go. Perfect.
I want to come back because we mentioned Jillian, but we didn't give her. Jillian Grant is the assistant editor on Power Girl, and we want to. We didn't mention her last name, and I want to give her credit.
Yeah, Jillian Grant, fantastic.
Fantastic, absolutely, I agree with you. Power Girl through issue 20. Is there anything else we can talk about? What may be coming in the future?
Nothing that's announced yet, but there is going to be.
I'll take their stuff that's not announced.
Yeah, there's unannounced stuff that I'm working on and also very excited about.
I'm very excited for that.
You know, this whole unannounced thing didn't used to be like that, and I'm still having a hard time deciding which is worse, because sometimes if you're anticipating things for a while because people are teasing you with it hasn't been announced yet, then you've created something really, really spectacular, and there's no way in the world the actual project is going to live up to that. So I'm always a little scared about that.
I'm since Lee's here, I just want to let people know that we're going to announce that sometime in December, particularly probably December 10th, we're gonna have a show. We're gonna have Mitch Gerrits and Tim Seeley on. They're gonna talk about their finally announced Peacemaker book, which I've known about for like a year, which I was not allowed to talk about
for a while. Yeah, I don't know how they kept that a secret as long as they did.
I've kept that quiet, and I've been like, okay, well, as soon as it's announced, you guys are coming on the show, and so we will on December 10th have them on, but yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of the way of the world. I've talked to people about it. Mike mentioned a couple of months ago, we were talking, like, and I agree. There's so many things that both him and I know about that we're not allowed to talk about because everybody else is not allowed to talk about it yet.
You got to wait for the official announcement. Yeah.
Yeah. The way to deal with that is you got to get over yourself. I have a huge ego. I'd be more than happy to babble all about stuff that people don't know about.
Well, I don't ask you.
I'm telling them stuff that they don't know about that they want to hear. Aren't I great? No, I'm not. Let it happen. Just let it happen.
So, I have one more question for you.
Of course.
Do you, when you're writing a comic book, do you ever get stuck?
No, but it's because by this point I've really refined my process and I know what to do. I pivot. I can show you actually. So, I was talking about issue 16 in particular. I keep journals. I work analog first and foremost. And this is volume 3 of my Power Girl notebooks. Cause I've already filled.
What is that? Did you print that? How does that happen?
I get custom notebooks from this place called Papier. And for every new, it's almost kind of like a ritual for me at this point. For every new character that I write, I get a new dedicated notebook to them. And it's kind of, I use it as an external brain or an external hard drive. It's where all my thoughts go. It's where I talk things out with myself. So back to issue 16. I wrote down, I transcribed notes from my editors, from Brittany and Jillian. You can probably see it says notes from Brittany and Jillian on PG-16. And then I also just have a conversation with myself. So here's something that I wrote after my first draft of issue 16. And it's titled, "Why Do I Hate Issue 16?" And because I could, even without like being able to really put into words what was off about the first draft, I knew it had.
Can you show that again? I'm sorry.
Posting. Well, it has spoilers, so I'm going to cover up some of them. Oh, I knocked my mom.
But it's just amazing.
But yeah, this is my third volume of the Power Girl notebooks. Actually, here's something I can show you. I took it with me to New York Comic Con, and I got people to sign it for me.
That's a really cool sticker.
It is.
That's on the back of my phone.
Ignition Press, shout out.
It is on the back of my phone.
To sign it. And so Dan Mora very kindly sketched a Power Girl for me when I asked for an autograph. And then Kieran Gillen did as well, right underneath. And then Al Ewing did as well over here. And I don't know. The notebooks are very important to me. You can see like there's quotes that inspire me and stickers and that kind of thing. So this is what I do. I don't get stuck. Instead, I just have a very important conversation with myself in my notebook and play with my little markers. This is where outlines happen. This is where I plan for future arcs and that kind of stuff. Everything happens here first. So I don't get writer's block. I pivot, and I do that every single time. And if you write for a living, it's a really important thing to train yourself out of. The idea that you can let block stop you from reaching your deadline is just a fiction. It's not real. You can push through. You just have to pivot. And that's something I can say with absolute confidence as a professional writer. You don't have to get writer's block. You just have to pivot.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. People who, I'm not saying this exclusively, this is not 100% true, but a lot of times when people say, well, I got writer's block, no, you just are unwilling to work it through.
Yeah, and there's different ways to work it through. Also, I like work out every single day, and if I, start even feeling a hint of block or getting stuck or anything like that, I go for a run, and I guarantee you, it'll shake something loose every single time.
That's great. That's great. God, I admire that.
It's obnoxious advice to say go for a run, but what I mean is like, do something else. Do literally anything else.
Professionals who do not work in an office building for somebody. Comic professionals work alone. 90% of the time, we all work alone. That other 10% of the time, we're at conventions. With way too much on the plate. So having those little vehicles for saving your soul are critical.
Yeah. I mean, I was texting with Philip Kennedy Johnson before we came on the show, and I'm sure that would be one of the ways he would get through writing's block is working out. Like, there's no question in my mind that would be his go-to.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he and I have talked about this too. Actually,
I'm sure. I listen. He's a friend of mine. I believe that he is. We do the show every week, and we get to talk to people who talk about comic books, and we love talking about comic books. I was anticipating, as I said earlier at the beginning of the show, I was anticipating having you on the show since we started it, and
that is true.
I am blown away at how wonderful it has been. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, no, thank you. I've had a blast chatting with you guys. I would do this again in a heartbeat.
Well, listen, there's more to be announced, and you're always welcome back.
That's true. I do have some big stuff coming up that I'd love to talk about when the time comes.
I've been looking forward to meeting you, and I am not the least bit disappointed. You're great.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And find Leah on her socials. I want to give you the opportunity. You're on a medium. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
To keep pre-ordering Power Girl so I can keep writing it. I would really love that. I never want it to end. I'm having too much fun. But yeah, that's pretty much it. David Baldion is going to take over art starting with issue 17.
That was a more broad invitation. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
You got something in mind.
It doesn't have to be comics.
It sounds like you have something in mind.
It doesn't have to be comics.
Do you want me to talk about politics? Is that
you can if you want?
I don't think you want me to.
Oh, you would be.
My politics are on my Instagram. I'm very open about it.
I encourage people to go find out about it, and I encourage people to do that.
Vote. That's coming up.
We talked about that before you got into the green room.
We made
a point of that. This is our last show before we vote.
Yeah, I'm going to be voting early this Friday.
I've already voted.
Yeah.
My daughter and I had to discuss that this time around because last time, 4 years ago, we voted absentee because one of us at least was going to be out of town. This time it just means, I show up for school board elections. It just means too much to us as humans to not go out there and vote in the old traditional style. For an old fart like me, okay, you get that. But my daughter's like the next generation too. So
I just got a mailer, like a postcard mailer today in the mail, letting me know there's going to be a DJ at the polling place.
great.
So while I'm waiting in line to vote, I'm going to have DJ entertainment.
That's
my wife and I voted early last Friday, and we took. So I have my middle son is 23, and he's not been interested in voting prior to this, and he voted this year for the first time. So
Wow.
I was very excited to bring him to vote. So yeah, absolutely
we'll
vote.
see a lot of that. First time voting, a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, my 19-year-old will also be voting for the first time, but it's not as surprising as the 23-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've already voted at least once. I grew up in Chicago, and my first vote was cast in February of 1955. So I suspect that guy is still voting.
That's not legal.
I'm sorry, didn't I say I'm from Chicago?
I'm sorry.
Who's this kitty making a cameo?
It is. This is Penny. She's 13 and
Oh.
has gotten very, very affectionate. And we used to sort of kind of ban her from my office during broadcast hours, but screw that.
Well, she's to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, her younger sister gets jealous.
Yeah, my cat Grayson is banned from the office during broadcast. He'll knock my camera off usually because he walks right in front of my screen all the time.
I really thought I have 3 cats. I thought at least one of them would make an appearance because they're not used to hearing me speak so much. So whenever I do podcasts or like Zoom meetings or something, they have to come investigate and they sniff the mic and they sniff the camera and get all up in my business. But it's pretty funny. I think it's cute.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, the nickname for this show is the Pop Culture Squad Cats. Just move the T and the S, and it's good.
Yeah, that works.
Thank you so much, Leah, for being here. It's been wonderful.
Course.
Thank you so much.
It was amazing chatting with you guys. Thank you so much for the really thoughtful and amazing conversation. This was so fun.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In our show, and I look forward to seeing you here again and at some convention. Lord knows.
I'd love that.
All right.
Good night.
Bye. That's great.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, I could not be more excited, and it went better than I could have even expected. I mean, it's unbelievable. Mike, we are a week away from voting our future away.
No, hopefully not away.
Hopefully to the future.
Hopefully we're voting to assure our future.
That's what I definitely want to do.
It's up for grabs.
Next week at this time, we're not going to be live here. We are going to have a program. We're going to have a program for you guys. If you want to turn away from the news, you can watch us. If you want to watch us later, you can watch us later. But next Thursday, we will be live again, and we will have our good friend Dean Haspiel on the show. We're going to be talking about Chest Face. We're going to be talking about whatever else he wants to talk about. We're going to talk about whatever else we want to talk about. But next Thursday, November 7th, Dean Haspiel will be on the show because, it's been too long since Dean's been live.
No, I think he's still alive.
Well, since he's been live on the show.
On the show, right.
Right.
But I could be wrong, and maybe he's not, which would make for a really interesting show.
I mean, I saw him last week, so he was okay then. I saw he posted today. One of the things we're going to talk about with that Chest Face is he's asking people to draw his weird character in their style, and it's been quite a thing. I don't know if you've followed that. You should. I know you're not on Instagram, but if you follow it, he's asked everybody to draw a chest face, which I don't know, but in their own style, and
Think
they're
of a
doing it.
handsome MODOK.
What?
Think of a more handsome MODOK.
It's like headless thing. That's what I see him.
Hey, it's comics.
So,
if you can't keep the weird in comics, we have no business being
listen,
here.
Dean's going to keep the weird in comics, and he's going to be back next week. We will, next time you see us live, we will be talking to Dean Haspiel. We'll be excited about it. We will, by that point, have quite a lineup for you of the next guests that we're going to have. And listen, we appreciate you guys. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate the support we've had. Please check out popculturesquad.com. We are currently having a lot of content that we're trying to get on there for you. We have a recap of New York Comic Con on there today. We have new number ones for this week on there today. Mike has a column from yesterday. Tomorrow we're going to have a new column from Ed Cato, which, we need to get Ed back on the show, but we're trying to be there for you and keep you up to date on news and give you some things to think about. So thank you again, always, for being there.
Folks, if you like what we're doing, tell your friends.
Yeah.
If you don't like what we're doing, screw it. Tell your enemies.
Yeah. Don't tell your friends that. Tell your friends you like us, whether you like us or not. That's how right. I feel about it.
That's fair.
All right, everybody. We'll see you later.
Okay. Have a great voting day.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?